Good morning. I'm Phoebe Boucher, managing editor at Raven Chronicles Press. Raven is a Northwest literary organization that's been around since 1991. This is a years-long series and project that we're calling Banned Books Project. Raven will be posting on our YouTube channel podcasts of writers reading excerpts from banned books that are meaningful to them or are of historical or literary importance. Today we have Sharon Hashimoto. Sharon's second poetry collection, More American, won the 2021 Off the Grid Poetry Prize, judged by Marilyn Nelson, and the 2022 Washington State Book Award in Poetry. She is a recipient of an NEA Fellowship in Poetry, and she lives in Tukwila, Washington, with her husband, poet Michael Spence, and their two cats. Sharon,
Hi.
way.
Okay, so first off, I want to thank Phoebe and Raven Chronicles for giving me an opportunity to speak about these banned books. And I'm going to start by saying that when Phoebe first asked me to participate, and what she did is she gave me some examples of books that had been banned. And she mentioned Julie Otsuka's When the Emperor Was Divine. And I was just shocked because, like, it's such a beautiful book and so well written. And I had never heard about any issues about with it. And so it really hit a nerve with me to think that this book had been banned. I find this really especially concerning, thinking about the times that we're living in. And I guess I was like looking at the news and I was looking at Den's show, and they talked about how last month there's an organization called Sudu for Solidarity, and they had gathered with about 150 people to reflect on the connections between the current moment and the history of Japanese American World War II incarceration. One of their speakers, Anise, meaning that he's probably in his late 80s, close to 90s, he spoke, and this is a part of his speech. And he said, "How is history repeating itself? Today, there's a great deal of fear in the immigrant community and even in the university foreign student population. Instead of soldiers, ICE agents en masse are abducting people off the streets and sending them to isolated detention centers or a foreign concentration camp. And these prisoners are not afforded due process, much as like what we were experienced. And recently, the Supreme Court has ruled that these residents should be allowed due process." I really love When the Emperor Was Divine. Um, because like growing up, I was never told about the internment camps. I had to really hunt details down. My mother wouldn't really talk about those times, and other than she said it happened, and I understood that the situation was very complicated. Um, Osuka really shows just enough, and she gives a beautiful, full picture without romanticizing or dramatizing the situation. And her language is just absolutely gorgeous. So reading her book, it wasn't like I had to hunt things down. It was kind of like this lovely picture of what the times were about. And I don't mean lovely, I mean in terms of her language describing it was what I was so enamored with. So, When the Emperor Was Divine has received numerous distinctions. It had an Alex Award from the American Library Association. It had a Literature Award from the Asian Pacific American Librarians Association. And she had a prestigious Phoenix Award. The book, which is loosely based on Osuka's mother's World War II experience, received overwhelmingly positive reviews when it was published in 2002 and was embraced by educators who found its content to be exceptionally relevant in the surge of Islamophobia that followed 9/11. And so her book came out in 2002. So this is a very slim volume. It's only about 150 pages long. And it was really difficult to find an excerpt because the whole book is written so well. And all these pieces come together and it's written in multiple points of view. And I've picked out just like two sections. They tend to be a little bit longish, but it gave me such a vivid picture of the experience. So the first section that I'm going to read has to do is when this family, there's a mother, a daughter, and a son, and they first arrive at camp, and the father has already been taken away by the FBI to another detention camp. So this is my first section. They had been assigned to a room in a barrack, in a block not far from the fence. The boy, the girl, their mother. Inside there were 3 iron cots and a pot-belly stove and a single bare bulb that hung down from the ceiling. A table made out of crate wood. On top of the rough wooden shelf, an old Zenith radio they had brought with them on the train from California. A tin clock, a jar of paper flowers, a box of salt. Tacked to the wall beside a small window, a picture of Joe DiMaggio torn from a magazine. There was no running water, and the toilets were half a block away. Far away on the other side of the ocean, there was fighting, and at night the boy lay awake on his straw mattress and listened to the bulletins on the radio. Sometimes in the darkness, he heard noises drifting from other rooms, the heavy thud of footsteps, the shuffling of cards. Over and over again, the creaking of springs. He heard a woman whispering, lower, lower, there, and a man with a high voice singing, Auf Wiedersehen, sweetheart, Auf Wiedersehen. Someone said, just say sayonara, Frank. Someone said, bonsoir. Someone said, please shut up, please. Someone else belched. There was a window above the boy's bed, and outside were the stars and the moon and the endless rows of black barracks, all lined up in the sand. In the distance, a wide empty field where nothing but sagebrush grew. Then the fence and the high wooden towers. There was a guard in each tower, and he carried a machine gun and binoculars, and at night he manned the searchlight. He had brown hair and green eyes, or maybe they were blue, and he had just come back from a tour of the Pacific. On their first day in the desert, his mother had said, be careful. Do not touch the barbed wire fence, she had said, or talk to the guards in the towers. Do not stare at the sun. And remember, never say the emperor's name out loud. The boy wore a blue baseball cap, and he did not stare at the sun. He often wandered the fire break with his head down and his hands in his pockets, looking for seashells and old Indian arrowheads in the sand. Some days he saw rattlesnakes sleeping beneath the sagebrush. Some days he saw scorpions. Once he came across a horse skull bleached white by the sun. Another time, an old man in a red silk kimono with a tin pail in his hand who said he was going down to the river. Whenever the boy walked past the shadow of the guard tower, he pulled the cap down low over his head and tried not to say the word. But sometimes it slipped out anyway. Hirohito, Hirohito, Hirohito. He said it quietly, quickly. He whispered it. So what I really like about this section is all the little details, which is kind of like how I receive details about the internment and the camps. The one thing that my mother was always saying is like there was a pot-belly stove, there were the 3 metal cots. There was a single light bulb that hung above the for illuminating the room. So those are the 3 things that we were talking about, but I didn't know what else they did. I mean, it wasn't a picture that I could see. The second section, which is kind of like explains a little bit more to me about why people didn't talk about it, because there was absolutely nothing to do. And this is the section I'm going to read. It was not like any desert he had read about in books. There were no palm trees here, no oasis, no caravans of camels slowly winding across the dunes. There was only the wind and the dust and the hot burning sand. In the afternoon, the heat rose up from the ground in waves. The air above the barracks shimmered. It was 95 degrees out, 100, 110. Old men sat outside on the long, narrow benches, not talking, whittling away at pieces of wood as they waited for the hours to pass. The boy played marbles on the laundry room floor. He played Chinese checkers. He roamed through the barracks with the other boys in his blocks, playing cops and robbers and war. Kill the Nazis, kill the Japs. On days when it was too hot to go out, he sat in his room with a wet towel over his head and leafed through the pages of old Life magazines. He saw the bombed out cities of Europe and the Allied soldiers in Burma, fleeing to India through the hot, steamy jungle. His sister lay on her cot for hours, staring, transfixed, at the white majorette boots and men in their bathrobes in the Sears Roebuck catalog. She wrote letters to her friends on the other side of the fence, telling them all she was having a good time. With you, wish you were here. Hope to hear from you soon. Their mother darned socks by the window. She read. She made them paper kites with tails woven out of potato sack strings. She took a flower arranging class. She learned to crochet. It's something to do. And for 1 week, there were doilies under everything. Mostly, though, they waited for the mail, for the news, for the bells, for lunch and breakfast and dinner, for one day to be over and the next day to begin. When the war is over, the boy's mother told him, we can pack up our things and go home. He asked her when he thought that might be. In a month, maybe? 2 months? A year, tops? She shook her head and looked out the window. 3 young girls in dirty white frocks were playing ladies in the dust. Oh, bother, they cried out. And hello, have more tea. And in the distance, there were ravens riding the updrafts. There's no telling, she said. So,
Wow.
yeah. So, I mean, when I read the second section, I'm going like, of course my mother wouldn't say anything because what was there to talk about? There was nothing to do. And I think that's some of the things that Julie Otsuka really captures well. So in 2022, when The Emperor Was Divine was added to the growing list of books banned as part of the conservative backlash against critical race theory, and the ban stems from a request submitted by teachers in Wisconsin's Muskego, Norway school district who wanted to include the book in their 10th grade AP English class. When the district school board formally denied the request, the board offered very little justification. So I thought this was really interesting. They said there were no complaints about the book. The board took it upon itself to pull it for a subcommittee to review after new board members were elected on a critical thinking, not critical race platform. The book has remained under review ever since. Um,
Hmm.
so this is kind of like some of the criticisms that they were talking about. So the school board president, Chris Buckmeister, called the book too sad. Okay.
It's sad.
And yeah,
Well,
and
just like
Terry
we can't
Boyer,
talk about the Holocaust because it's too sad.
right, right,
Right.
right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Terry Boyer, a board member who serves on the committee reviewing the book, said it lacked an American perspective. Okay, one thing about the internment is the fact that almost the huge majority was not the Issei first generation, it was the second generation who were American citizens. Buckmaster also said the school district's 2020 directive to include at least one book by a woman of color in the 10th grade curriculum was by definition discriminatory. And the novel in question, When the Emperor Was Divine, has already been assigned to incoming freshmen at more than 60 colleges and universities and is a regular community read selection in many cities. So, um, not good. Anyway, um, I am very surprised. Sometimes I go and speak at conferences and stuff like that, and I'm surprised about how many people who know absolutely nothing about the Japanese American internment. And what's scary is to see that younger generations, I'm talking about the fourth and fifth generations, don't know this history at all either. And then none of it's addressed in schools. It's mostly like, me sending my grandnephews and grandnieces all the children's books I can find about the internment that I can. But that's probably the only thing that they know. Um,
Hmm.
so if you're going to solve this problem, I think the best thing is to do is just simply to read a book like When the Emperor Was Divine, and perhaps that's the best way to learn how much you don't know about anything.
Right.
And when I was reading this book again, the way that Julie Otsuka fills in all those blanks for me, I thought was like one of the best things about it.
Yeah, I'll be sure to when I post it to post information about the book also.
Okay.
Yeah, that yeah. I guess the what's happening now is that just people, the current administration wants people to be dumber and dumber and
Right,
only learn history that they think is appropriate for people to learn.
right.
And
Though
that's
I think the quote I saw
incomprehensible.
was, "Learn history the way it was."
Right.
What does that mean?
I don't know. Uh,
Yeah,
yeah, nothing that too sad. Yeah, I heard that about some people have that had banned